Hi, I'm Ryan Szymanski, curator for Battleship New Jersey Museum and Memorial, and today, in honor of Shark Week, we've got a video on abandoning ship. So, what happens if you're on an Iowa-class battleship and you have a catastrophic wrecking event and you got to get off the ship? What do you do? Well, a common misconception is that the ship has lifeboats. And while we've got 6 ship's boats, they are for use when we're operating in a port. They're not for abandoning ship. It takes way too long to get the davits ready and deploy them. So, what you would use during an abandoned ship situation are these life rafts. Iowa-class battleships were refit in the 1980s to have 81 Mark VI 25-man inflatable life rafts. The ship's crew was about 1,600, but we carried enough rafts for about 1/3 above that number, so that if some amount of them gets damaged, obviously an Iowa-class battleship isn't just going to sink out of the blue. It would take some sort of engagement or wrecking event or something else happening which could cause damage to some of the rafts. But even if that happens, there should still always be enough rafts for everyone. On most ships, these Mark VI rafts are in plastic canisters set up along the side of the ship, and they can automatically deploy from those canisters. On an Iowa-class battleship, they found out that that didn't work. In 1968, when New Jersey was doing gunnery tests, just after being refit with the inflatable rafts, prior to that she had the rigid-hulled Carly floats strapped up all along the side of the turrets and the superstructure. When those were replaced with the inflatable rafts that took up significantly less space, and were significantly less flammable, they found that when you fired the main guns, the overpressure from the guns would be enough to trick the life raft sensor into thinking that it was at a certain depth. So it's designed to automatically deploy if it gets down to a certain depth, i.e. a certain pressure. So the pressure of the 16-inch guns going off tricks this into deploying. So they had inflatable life rafts blowing up all over the deck, presumably with that comical, cartoony sound when it was doing it. So they come up with the stopgap solution. They want to delay the deployment to Vietnam, but this is something that they have to carry. The stopgap solution they come up with is you just put them in canvas bags. So in the 1980s, all of the Iowa-class battleships have their life rafts. They're the same Mark VIs that other ships have. They're just in bags instead of inflatable rafts. If there was a catastrophic wrecking event and we couldn't throw this in the water and deploy it right away, the strap holding the raft has a hydrostatic release on it. This will deploy because of either water pressure, or if I was to come up here and hit this because the ship was starting to slowly sink and I wanted to deploy it, and that will cause the strap to come off, so the rafts will fall away, and then they will automatically inflate once they've gotten into the water. So that's how the rafts work. Assuming you don't have a situation like, say, what happens to Indianapolis, where it's a pretty instantaneous sinking and you jump out of your rack and barely have time to make it in the water, what you're trained to do is muster at specific locations. Everybody has a billet to go to a certain life raft, and some of the people in those billets have instructions to grab things along the way. So, for example, oftentimes your life raft will be primarily people from your own division. Because you're all sleeping together, you're probably going to muster to the same area for your life raft. But oftentimes there will be folks from the gunnery department or the navigation department or whatnot assigned to grab a specific implement and come here. That is in addition to the things that are permanently in the raft, and we'll go over that list in a second. But some other things that you might need to get, there is a person whose job it is to grab the logbook from the bridge to salvage that. There's people's jobs to grab navigation implements. There are people's jobs to grab small arms, either handgun or rifle, and a certain amount of ammunition from the small arms lockers around the ship, which can be used for defense against sharks, or if you end up in a situation like World War II where it wasn't uncommon to machine gun people in life rafts, you at least have a way to fight back, although that's banned by the Geneva Convention, should not happen. And then there's other various things that you're supposed to grab. However, sometimes it's a catastrophic wrecking event, and the best you can do is jump over the side and get in a raft. So I've got a list here of what a Mark VI 25-man life raft is supposed to have. 2 oars, a bailing bucket if it starts to take on water, a signal mirror, a signal whistle, a flashlight with 4 D-cell batteries, a utility knife, a first aid kit, dye marker packets. Most everything so far has made sense. A dye marker packet is you put this in the water and it makes a big brightly colored slick around your raft, so an aircraft high up above is more likely to see you. Motion sickness tablets, survival fishing kit, 25 survival blankets, 25 16-ounce water containers, and survival food packages with 6 food bars each. During World War II, it was not uncommon for sailors to be in the water for 3 or 4 days without pickup. So these rations are for that period of time. Although there were epic endurance experiences during World War II, such as the wrecking of SS Roger B. Tawney and Louis Zamperini's airplane, which was made famous in the book and movie Unbreakable, something like that, where they end up spending hundreds of days in life rafts, or over 100 days in life rafts. So there are certainly precedents for staying in longer than that. So in addition to these things here, which you're stocked with and the crew is checking periodically to make sure you have, the raft also has a hand pump, a patch kit, reflective tape, rain catchers built into it, fishing kit, things like that, so that you can extend your survival if needed. But again, especially by the 1980s, you should not be in the water that long. Oh, that's another thing that you had to grab that I forgot about. You would usually have a radioman assigned to every couple of rafts, and they would grab a Gibson Girl, basically hand crank emergency radio that you could sling over your shoulder and jump in the raft and operate it via hand crank. This sort of emergency radio was invented during World War II, believe it or not, by the Germans. You Kriegsmarine fanboys, the Kriegsmarine did know how to come up with emergency stuff when we sank their ships. So they come up with this, and we save the first group of them in a lifeboat that we come across, and come across one. And so the US Navy starts manufacturing these for their own ships and ships' boats. And as far as I can tell, we basically used the same pattern up through the 80s while the ship was in service. This came to us with the ship. It's the same basic pattern as World War II, so I believe we were just using the same thing for the last 50 years. We might still be using it. It's a relatively simple device. So essentially, you've got a hand crank on top to charge it. Radio antennas work better the higher up they are. The higher up you can get them, the more of a signal they'll send. So the antenna is basically like this long string. You attach it to a balloon, and this would come with a yellow waterproof canvas bag, one for the Gibson Girl itself and another one with a bottle that will inflate that balloon to make it rise with the antenna on it. And it's got some other stuff. It's got a ground that you just drop into the water, and on the top of it, it's got all your Morse code letters. So basically, you deploy this thing even if you're in a little inflatable raft, and you can use it to send a signal. Remember, if you're taking a Gibson Girl on the lifeboat with you, don't forget all of her accessories and her handbag. Also during World War II, shark repellent was a common factor, and I suspect the dye marker packets also doubled as shark repellent. They tend to be a fluorescent green color. So I suspect they just combine those two things into one kit. So what do you think? Do I need a bigger boat, or do you think this ship's good enough? What are some other things that you think should go in a life raft? It's very common during wartime to see the bare minimum initially start out, and by the end of the war to see significantly more things on that list. Battleship New Jersey receives operating support from the New Jersey Department of State, also from a number of other businesses and private individuals like yourselves. We really appreciate your support, and there's a link in the description below if you'd like to donate to help the museum out. You can also support us by liking, sharing, and subscribing so more people find out about us and our channel. Thanks for watching.